So I'm not going to spend time on this because they are kind of said who we are. I'm Crandall Randall. We're urban designers, architects, and planners. And here's a project we did. Look like Third Street in Oak Park, Illinois. That's what it looks like today. We expect your downtown to see this revitalization. I'm the principal of the firm, lead planner and urban designer. I'll go over that. And I've been over 50 of these plans. So it's not that I know anything, but some of those have a lot of characteristics that we can share with the community. That we want to hear feedback from you, what you want to have in your town. And we've won awards, and we've worked with places big and small. And this is Whitefish. And we bring up Whitefish because it's next to Glacier National Park. Like you guys are close to the Redwoods State National Park, and it's about the same size. Our team has a landscape architect, and this is one of their projects. How many people have been to Sisters, Oregon? So this is the streetscape and a lot of greenery and a livable environment. Again, it looked a lot like your downtown before this project, and we expect that kind of greenery. We've also done a market study with Johnson Economics, and there we're going to talk about what the potential is if we make some strategic changes in downtown. And it will also help us identify priority projects because money's going to need to be spent, and there's what we call return on investment analysis, and that needs to be done. In terms of the project, it's broken up into two phases, and we're just beginning the process. No drawings have been done, nothing has been created, and our first step is to really understand the existing conditions and the issues and concerns of the community. So, as I mentioned, fill this out, and this is going to be the touchstone for us to respond to you. So when we come back with the concepts, we're going to talk about how they respond to the input that you gave us. So if you give us lots of information, the better those concepts will be. So thank you for coming out tonight. And then the next concept will be discussed on a meeting on November 6th. So mark this down on your calendar. So it's 2 months from today or so. And we think it would be a very fun workshop to go through. Okay, so those will be refined over the next few months and be finalized in phase 2, and the dates for those meetings will be announced at a later date. In terms of what's the downtown, so again, you got a map on the table, but what we've said is that the main part of the downtown is the core, and that extends from about 4th Street to Front, and from Alice Street to Seaquake. And if you see these dashed lines, that's about a quarter-mile walk. If you look at the great downtowns of the world, most of the density and the uses that you have are within the walking distance. So that being said, there are some influence areas that we are studying as well, and that's a 10-minute walking radius. So that includes Safeway, that includes some of the neighborhoods, and it also includes everything in Beachfront Park. So we'll be looking at that area as well. So here's a view of that, those two areas in plan view. Again, this is going to be online, so you can take a look at these in detail. And the core boundary, and we talk about the heart of the downtown. I want you to think about this. If you were to say to somebody, I will meet you in downtown, we want to create that place that's imageable, that's worthy of a postcard, or for younger people, of a TikTok or a YouTube moments, or whatever we're calling these today. But we want to make this place so memorable and joyful that you're going to be proud of it and help us know what the heart should be of the downtown. All right, I'm going to get it quickly and talk about the existing conditions that we've done. The desired outcome of this is to identify opportunities and constraints, things to build off and things to mitigate if it's constrained. And those are the questions that we're going to ask you as well. So that report is going to be available online on the CC Downtown Plan that you see on the bottom of the page here. That's a website. And it's going to have 3 chapters: land use, mobility, active transportation, walking and biking, and the market analysis. And we started looking at your literature review, and I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because it's a little dry, frankly. But we've looked at a whole series of documents. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel, look at past policy or zoning or things like that, but we have an understanding of those. There's 2 key things that we looked at. the Economic Development Strategy Action Plan and the General Plan. And the General Plan, the Economic Development Strategy Action Plan really has a number of things that talk about the downtown in terms of housing, infrastructure, tourism attraction, and enhancements of the downtown. So we're focusing on those. And it's also got an emphasis on two things: visitor and local commercial, and their districts on it. So they're talking about local services largely on the 101 couplet, and also thinking about visitor uses in the downtown along Front Street. The general plan also talks about some nuts and bolts elements that for improvements, such as like undergrounding utility poles that are very unsightly and affect the growing conditions of trees. And also there's a directive to do streetscape improvements so that you will get more green, public art, and other enhancements that come along with that. And other ways to create a way for people to have more awareness of your downtown, because as you know, it's easy to drive by the downtown. So how do we direct and divert traffic into the downtown? And the general plan in 2001 said maybe we should be looking at traffic signals. It also talks about renovating the plaza that you have in the downtown and the tsunami walkways, the mall way. And so that's something we will be looking at as well, public spaces. And give us feedback on these. What you think about them? Are they in the right location, or should we be reimagining a mall somewhere else or an open space? This also talks about housing. And so your general plan has an element, and it talks about affordable and market rate or housing that doesn't need subsidy. And we want input on where housing should be in the downtown. So in terms of additional land use, we've done an existing study of each of those uses that you have in downtown. You see those listed in bullet points. I'm going to focus on the two pieces that mean the most to revitalize your downtown in the near term for 5 to 10 years. And we want to see significant changes in the retail offering in 5 years, and maybe a lot of housing in 10 years. So this is a page out of the document. It's pretty dense. I'm not going to talk about all these pie charts and the summaries of it, but if you're interested in that data, it's going to be available online. So let's talk about retail, because there's a misunderstanding of what retail it is. So the definition is businesses that engage in sales of merchandise, like clothing shops, footwear, sporting goods, jewelry, art galleries, and grocery stores, eating and drinking establishments, and personal services. It doesn't include things like banks, health clinics, things that are open 9 to 5 and are closed on the weekend. We want to create these 18-hour activity uses that I can get a coffee at 8 a.m., have dinner, and go to a cinema or a nightclub till midnight. So that's the environment we're looking for, some key streets, and not a downtown where you roll up the sidewalks and people go away. So retail's the key piece to do that. That doesn't mean we don't want to have those other uses, but we want to focus how to get the retail. There are also two types of retail. One is local serving. So if I'm looking for a light bulb, I don't want to go to a boutique shop that sells a high-end light bulb. I want 5. So I want a Safeway. And there are days I want to go to McDonald's because the price is right, and I don't want to go to a full-on restaurant. And I also need things like pharmacies. So those are local serving uses for the residents. And where we think that is currently occurring is in the 101 couplet. We want to strengthen those uses and make sure that they're available throughout the planning period. There are some problems with that. How many people shop on Amazon online? A lot of you. And so what's happening with that? It's killing the brick and mortar of retail across the country. So where I see across from the Tractor Supply building, vacant buildings, that's not an unusual situation. And frankly, that's probably not going to change. And so what we're seeing is what we call these ghost box. And the other thing is we're seeing competition. So on the outlying areas of your downtown, you've got Walmarts, you've got dollar stores. All those things are weakening your downtown offering. That doesn't mean that you want to give up on these areas, but don't expect a lot of expansion of these areas in the future. Okay? But we also want to talk about visitor serving retail. So the difference is we want, as directed by the general plan, we want to have things that create experiences. So places for people not only to get the fundamental things they need on a daily and weekly basis like a grocery store, but where's that special shop that somebody comes to Crescent City and wants something that's memorable, that's only available on the North Coast, and creates that opportunity for window shopping. So you see things like dress shops, flower stores, and think about, this is an example of our project in Whitefish, Montana. That sparkle and characteristics that is not only in the summertime, but in the rainy times in January and February. We want to create a joyful and memorable environment, and that's how you get those. And we think that's really well suited into your downtown core. So again, this is not going to happen unless we address some of these preconditions. You've got to have, you see the image on the left, you've got to have that sparkle and attraction and activity that you see. You need to deal with things like people are houseless and do it humanely. And you need to think about, once you get these improvements, about cleanliness and making sure that it's not, when it's beautiful when you build it, but it is 10 and 20 years from now. So what we say is retail is the hardest use to get right. It's formulaic. It's like putting a great meal together. If you don't have all the ingredients and you're baking a wonderful cake, if you don't have the yeast, you're going to end up with a rock, right? And so if you think about this as a recipe, the recipe for success means a strict adherence to the fundamentals that I'm going to go through really quickly. So if you look at a historic downtown, it's got the right amount of uses. So we're looking at 100,000 square feet of retail shops. That includes the uses that are contiguous. So if you go to a mall, for example, if a shop goes out of business, what do? They make it look like there's something going to go in there immediately. We don't want to have discontinuous uses that are closed at 5 o'clock. We don't want to have parking lots, and we don't want to have empty shops. We want to make sure that somebody strolling down that street is visually entertained. We also want to have anchor uses. You're lucky in 3rd Street that you have an anchor use. For example, grocery stores are the most frequently used retail use for any community. An average family goes to a grocery store 1.5 times a week. And if you look at your downtown, at your grocery outlet, that's 4,000 to 5,000 trips a week that are coming to the downtown. What that does, gives you chaining of trips. You may not do it every time, but if you've got a wonderful street, you're just going to park once and say, I've done my shopping, let's go someplace for lunch or something else that I'm looking for on that main street. So they drive that traffic into the downtown. The other thing is, it can't be one-sided. You need to have two, because people want to walk down one street, cross the street, and come back to the other side. And to be able to have that visual connection to that is very important, and it can't be too long. 5-minute walking distance is what we're looking at, and we need parking. So your downtown has a lot of public parking today, but we need to plan for success. And some of that parking, we might want to get rid of. So we need to make sure that this is what we would call parks out. And finally, we need a busy street. And so we're looking at a Goldilocks zone, what I call it. We don't want to have too little traffic, but we don't want too much. So if I want to sit at an outdoor cafe, I don't want to sit on the 101 corridor because it's too busy, right? Too much car traffic. You can't have a conversation. On the other hand, if I look at 3rd, there's not enough traffic because you need more people driving by to see things. So we want to induce some traffic on Third and some of the other streets like Front to get that. So that's the recipe. The other thing we want to think about is what the ground floor of those buildings are. So imagine you're walking down the street. I want to do window shopping, so we want a lot of transparency, and we want to think about the weather. So I'm from the Northwest, I'm from Portland, and I know that I will shop in the winter if I've got a canopy protecting me from the weather. So are there other things what we want to do to make it easy for people to shop in the downtown in February? Yeah, but these are some fundamental things that we want to do. So the inventory talks about retail, and I won't go into this, but there's a considerable amount of area. And when we think about the downtown core, it's evenly split between Third and also the other streets. A lot of detail here that doesn't need to go into, other than I do want to point this out, that your Main Street Third is about 46,000 square feet, and most of that is taken by the grocery outlet. So if I'm looking for that target 100,000 square feet, we've got some work to do, right? So one of the things that we got to do is not start from scratch, but really build on your advantages. We've got history in your downtown, because this was historically where you had your Main Street. And we find the communities who build on this history are most successful. That's not to say that you're going to get buildings that look like this in the future, but we want that kind of activity and that image shows. We want to build off the people that I call pioneers and settlers, the people who've already invested in the downtown, whether it's Enoteca or Paragon or Seaquake. We want to make it easy for them to be successful and draw more of those uses. We want to build on the momentum of projects that are being done, like Front Street. And how many people know there are improvements that are going to happen in the park? Most of you probably do, right? But there's going to be considerable improvements there. So once those are finished, we want to build off of that momentum. And then we also want to think about a vacuum, because what we do know is about 1.5 million to 2 million people come to the state and national parks a year. And I know that when I come here, I want to do more than just go to the state and national parks. I want to be able to go to a restaurant. Maybe I forgot my paddle that I'm going on the Smith River. Where do I buy that? And would be good to be able to get those in the downtown. What are the problems? I already talked about the backwater, not having enough traffic. I've already talked about what I call the missing teeth. You want to smile. Think about your storefronts as a smile, and we want to fill those in. Probably the biggest deterrent is a poor pedestrian environment, and we want to fix that. And then this sense, and this is my perception, you may not agree with this, but it feels placeless. What's unique about your downtown that says something about the city's motto, from the redwoods to the sea? That should be fundamental about what this downtown is about, and help me with what that should be. All right. So when we look at this, you see the things I'm looking at: blank walls, poor aging materials, placeless architecture, minimal transparency, front doors not facing the street. Things we can work on. So as part of our diagnosis, we looked at to say, what are those retail uses that I defined TUR? And as you can see, they're not a lot, right? The pink is where they are today. And I may have missed a building or two here, but that still doesn't really reduce the reality that you only got 46,000 square feet. But the question is, if we were to fill some of those vacancy, how much square foot could we get? And can we get closer to that 100,000? And this is our quick back of the envelope analysis of this. And we think that there's 60,000 feet. So if you add your current 46, 60, that gets us to that marker. So the good news is, if we do this right, you've got existing capacity to meet that. And that diagram talked about anchors. There's some vacant sites or underutilized sites that maybe we get that use that anchors those areas. So that's it as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about residential now. So when we talk about residential, the key word in here is primary use for living purposes, because we often talk about mixed use projects where we've got retail on the ground floor, housing above. We want to promote that, but we want to make sure we get a whole variety of housing types for people of different ages, people of different incomes, and types of housing that people may want. So you see an image of a little cottage housing with a lot of green, not a lot of density, apartment buildings adjacent to parks, and townhomes, and then housing over retail shops. We want all of that. We don't want to have just one of these. We want to have it all. Because what we do know is residential downtown is essential for revitalization. And the bottom bullet is probably the most important of this. They are clientele for those retail uses that we just talked about, for the built-in customer base. And what they also do is they provide that activity. So if we've got uses that people want to walk to and visit and window shop, that draws people saying, what are those people walking around downtown? I want to go and find out what that is. And then there's this other thing about safety. One of the things is that they provide the passive surveillance. You're always having somebody looking out of the window. And if there's illicit activity going on, there's people watching. And what we find is that illicit activity doesn't happen when we know that there are people around. Illicit activity happens out back and behind where nobody's watching that. So for people watching and living in downtown, that's healthy for you. There's rumble. And the other thing is, if you're living in downtown, it's not like you're living out of town where you've got a garden and you've got some acreage. We need to have amenities. And so that means parks and plazas and accessibility to those. And also think about how they're connected to schools, because we want families living in the downtown and we want what we call safe routes to school. And so we don't want to just throw these anywhere. We want to work in the amenities to the housing so that we're creating neighborhoods, not just housing development sites, someplace where you and I would want to live. So where could these occur? And there's some naturally occurring areas today. So there's adjacent to J Street, there's a series of townhomes and apartment buildings, and then there's some historic single-family homes adjacent to E and Peterson Park. These are areas that we want to build off of, and then in the core, we also want to see some more additional housing. At a minimum, we think these are areas for housing. If you've got ideas for other areas for housing, please chime in on that as well. So I won't go into this again, but there's some data on the analysis for your housing and the amount of mixed use. You can see there's not a lot of that. So I won't go into the detail of that much. All right, let's talk about walking and biking, mobility, active transportation. So what we say is, again, you need to think about your walking and bike network from the inside out. And we need to connect to the outlying neighborhoods. So we want to talk about walkability in the downtown, in the core, in that red 8th mile circle, and also within that quarter-mile circle, the 5-minute walk, because that's an easy, comfortable walk that most people will do all the time. And the wonderful thing about that, it encompasses a lot of things. Like it touches like Wild Rivers, the grocery outlet, and almost gets to Safeway. So if I would adjust the circle a little bit, you've got all those convenient uses that you use on a daily or weekly basis. So what we say, and what we have found, and this is a project that we did, is if you've got complete streets, it creates a complete downtown. I don't know one city that is a great place that we want to visit or live in that hasn't dealt with the streets. We all own it. Most cities are comprised of about 30 to 40% of the downtown is the streets. And as residents, you have a responsibility to take care of the parcel that you own. So if you do that, you have that characteristics. And this community, when we started it, didn't look a lot like this. Your downtown doesn't have complete streets. It's incomplete, and it's a large measure. And again, you may disagree with me on this, but this is one of the key reasons that you have an incomplete downtown. So like the retail, it's very formulaic, and I'm not going to get into this again, but it will be on the presentation, and we will address it as part of an analysis. But when we talk about complete streets, you got to turn your thinking around. And if you talk to a traffic engineer, generally they're most concerned about moving traffic through a town. Trucks and cars are king. If you want a healthy downtown, that's not what we want. We want an emphasis on the pedestrian. The pedestrian has to be the priority. And the design of a downtown street has fundamental requirements that engineers are not well suited to do. I will tell you this today. You need to have somebody who's an urban designer like me or somebody else who can lead to how to do that. The other thing is, if you design it for the most vulnerable, children, people who are differently able, who are blind, who are in wheelchairs, or who are old, we will design it and it will work for everybody. So we start with those criteria to design streets. So think about being a parent and you've got an 8-year-old and you want them to go somewhere. You should feel comfortable to say, walk through downtown. And if we can't do that, we failed. So the general plan talks about some improvements. And so I'm going to talk about, and we're going to do schemes that have already been discussed through your community over the last 20 years. And that is street enhancements on 3rd, H, maybe on I and K and some of the other streets. But at a minimum, we want to look at 3rd Street. We want to figure out how those improvements that you're doing at Beachfront Park are connected and bleed into the downtown so that it's easy to connect to the park and connect to the other parks like Peterson Park. There should be a connection between Beachfront Park and Peterson Park and to the other parts of the neighborhood. There may be other connections that you might identify as well. And so when we looked at the analysis, we looked at zones. So the roadway zones, pedestrian zones. And the analysis looked at things like overhead utility light, the amount of sidewalk lighting. Most of your lighting is for the roadway and not the sidewalks. The condition of your landscaping, frankly, it's minimal, if any. And then the width of the sidewalks, because if I would want to put an outdoor dining table and I want people to walk by and I don't want trees, they're too narrow. We can't fit all those through together, so we're going to look at ways of either widening the sidewalk or doing other ways of placing landscaping and other these street furniture elements. Look at the streets. Do we have places where we can put bike lanes? Because we want this to be bikeable. Are the crosswalks safe? Are the corners safe? And we want to think about the amount of parking we have on the street. Is it enough? Maybe we can eliminate it for some of this, for some landscaping. So that will all be done. So we've done a diagnosis of this. Our sub-consultant Greenworks has done it, and I won't get into the details. You can see it's very detailed, looking at a whole series of elements. But I'm going to jump to the results of that. And I will tell you, if we rate it like good, fair, and poor, the green would be good. If it's a fair street, it's yellow, and if it's poor, it's red. If these were all rating out red, you wouldn't need me. You would have a healthy downtown today. So what this tells us, you've got some work to do. And on the right, there's things that we need to address, like curb extension of the corners, lack of bike infrastructure, the width of the sidewalks, lighting, landscaping, and art and wayfinding. So those are the things we've identified. If there are other things you would like to see, let us know as well. Okay? So finally, I'm going to end this up because I've been talking way too much and talk about the future and the past. Because the market analysis really is, it's like driving a car, and if you're only looking at the past, it's like driving a car looking in the rearview mirror. A good market study is also projecting in the future. So what this market study does that. And so what we want to do within market study is to look at opportunities, and we've identified opportunities. And the opportunity is the downtown core will rely heavily on visitor demand. because you're a small city and you're going to need more customers for your businesses. And the market study says that you have an opportunity to pick up latent demand because there are people coming and wanting to shop in your downtown. But like lots of places, it's requiring an intervention. And we don't use this word lightly. It's truly an intervention. And because there's a bit of denial that some people may have, that you can just have magical thinking and things are going to happen. It's going to take substantial actions and to change what we call the investment environment. Because as an investor, I want to go where my profit's going to have the most certainty. So why is Chipotle on the 101 border? Because they have more certainty that they're going to be successful there. We need to give investors, entrepreneurs, if you wanted to open a business, you don't want to close it in 6 months. So we need to change that investment environment. Okay, so let's say you don't make any of these improvements. Yeah, you're going to get some growth. You're going to get a little bit, but you're going to kind of hobble along, get a little bit, and then 10 years from now, you're going to say, why didn't we do something? So if we make some strategic interventions in terms of the things that you see on the right, and the highlight is the most important one. Infrastructure improvements, because what we say is infrastructure improvements isn't beautification, it's economic development. And so what we will do is talk about, if you make these infrastructure improvements, what kind of development will result out of that. And we'll come back and talk to you about that. But that doesn't mean you can always stop there. You need to think about, if I'm a business owner, I need some assistance. And there are programs for this, whether it's storefront improvement or tenant improvement or other education programs to make your business better. All that needs to be mixed in. We also need to think about incentives and ways to make it easier to do a business. We've heard often that there's lots of red tape, and by the time you get a business going, you're exhausted. We want to make it easy for people to open businesses in the downtown. So what we want to do is what we call induce a market. And so that's going to require us to have a strategy for 5 years that talks about what are the projects, because you can't do everything at once. And we want laser-like focus on 5 things. We want to talk about the costs. We want to talk about who's responsible for it. And we want to have a schedule so that in 3 months, we want to have somebody responsible to give you a progress report so it doesn't fall through the cracks. So if we do all of that, that projection line changes considerably. So from going to 5,000 in 20 or 30 years, we think that we're all well on our way to getting 38,000 square feet in 10 years, and in 50 years, at least 50,000. And truthfully, I think this is really conservative. This is a baseline thing. And if you go to a city, like we showed you a picture of Sisters, Oregon, they're getting development where they never thought about it. And you're no different from that. It will organically happen. It's a snowball effect. So I say, bear with us, be part of this process, and I think we're going to see substantial change. So what do we want to see within 10 years with an intervention? So if I'm at the park, where do I go for an ice cream? I don't want to get in a car and go out of town to do that. I want to have these sorts of things. I forgot that paddle, like I said. Where's your outdoor store? Where's a place to rent a bike? Where's a place for you to have dinner? There are more options because you can never have enough restaurants in your downtown. So that's that 38,000 square feet. And finally, all of us may not be able to afford this, but at some point you may have a celebration or you may have a wedding and you want to have a special place to stay. And so this boutique hotel is a small hotel. And because right now you've got a lot of value-oriented hotels, which are great. There's no doubt about that. But what we want to do is have a place that is a little bit more upscale because those people bring in spending power. And so if I'm a business owner and I've got a restaurant and somebody can come in and spend $300 or $400 for dinner, we want a couple of those people visiting those establishments. So those are important to happen. They don't happen just anywhere, but we got to find a right spot for that. So imagine a rooftop restaurant at a hotel where I can see your lighthouse, I can see the park, and I can see the harbor. Picture that I think would be attractive to me to stand. Okay, one other thing in housing, I talked a little bit about this. We do think that we can get market rate housing. So we're doing a really good job in Crescent City, not we, but you as a community, and you're meeting all the state's requirements. So you're doing really well with that, but I think we need to get more of that. More of that, but we do need some market rate housing. We need a variety of places to do because we need that activation. So there's a market for that. Okay, so that's in the presentation. So I'm going to open it up for 2 or 3 questions. So if somebody wants a clarification, I'm going to do that, but this is an opportunity for you to talk about ideas or concepts. That's what the table discussions are for. But if there's something that wasn't clear in the presentation, I'll take 2 or 3 questions on that. So we'll take one of those real quick here. Mm-hmm. So the question is, what's my definition of market rate housing for those who can hear it? So when housing is, levels of housing is by what's called median family income. And there are levels for it. So most affordable housing you're seeing in town is 50% of median family income, and that's what people in this region are making. When I think of market rate housing, it's 80% median family MFI or above. It's not luxury housing, but it's still affordable for people who make what I call a living wage. So if I'm a teacher, if I'm a nurse, that's who the market I'm looking for that market rate housing. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
We like to look for those who live in that kind of space, those with that kind of loneliness, when we don't have the people who are making less money to retain those people with the work that will be offered as wages. That's just kind of the
So mark that down on it, and we'll have some more discussions on that. But you've got an issue about that because your information is very helpful for me, and you guys are the experts on this. Okay, so thank you very much.